"Here's a gift for your wedding. Enjoy it with our son," said Mary, my mother-in-law, as she handed me a teddy bear. It was cute, but I couldn't fully appreciate it. Mary and I hadn't been getting along, so her sudden kindness was confusing. I met Tom at our gym when he kindly helped me with a tricky machine. We hit it off and soon started dating. A year later, on my birthday, he proposed. Married life with Tom has been great, but I've had some worries, especially about my relationship with his mom, Mary. When we visited his family's mansion, I was surprised by their wealth. Tom, however, is down to earth and not into extravagant spending, which I admire. My dad always stresses the importance of financial independence, so Tom's frugal mindset resonated with me. But when I finally met my in-laws, Mary seemed to dislike me from the start. She made a hurtful comment about my work as a remote worker, implying I just play on the computer all day. It stung, despite my efforts to work hard and be responsible. Childhood friend love stories sound nice, but maybe they're not so common in reality. Since Mary's mood didn't improve, we decided it was best to leave. On our way home, Tom kept apologizing to me. "I'm really sorry about my mom. She's been upset about Emily and took it out on you. I'll talk to my dad about it later." Mary's behavior made me question if marrying Tom was the right choice, but I still loved him and wasn't ready to give up easily. I made a secret vow to prove Mary wrong. After our wedding, John suggested we move into a guest house on their property. "It's been empty for years," he explained. "As you get older, it's easy to lose touch with friends. We'd love to have you nearby." Feeling uneasy, I called my mom and showed her the teddy bear. She immediately told me to get rid of it. Shocked by my mom's reaction, I hurried to the police station. "My name is Sarah, I'm 28, and I work from home. I've been happily married to Tom for a year, though we don't have kids yet." I met Tom at our gym when he kindly helped me with a tricky machine. We hit it off and soon started dating. A year later, on my birthday, he proposed. Married life with Tom has been great, but I've had some worries, especially about my relationship with his mom, Mary. When we visited his family's mansion, I was surprised by their wealth. Tom, however, is down to earth and not into extravagant spending, which I admire. My dad always stresses the importance of financial independence, so Tom's frugal mindset resonated with me. But when I finally met my in-laws, Mary seemed to dislike me from the start. She made a hurtful comment about my work as a remote worker, implying I just play on the computer all day. It stung, despite my efforts to work hard and be responsible. Childhood friend love stories sound nice, but maybe they're not so common in reality. Since Mary's mood didn't improve, we decided it was best to leave. On our way home, Tom kept apologizing to me. "I'm really sorry about my mom. She's been upset about Emily and took it out on you. I'll talk to my dad about it later." Mary's behavior made me question if marrying Tom was the right choice, but I still loved him and wasn't ready to give up easily. I made a secret vow to prove Mary wrong. After our wedding, John suggested we move into a guest house on their property. "It's been empty for years," he explained. "As you get older, it's easy to lose touch with friends. We'd love to have you nearby." The guest house was spotless and roomy, much cozier than your average home, even though it had been vacant for years. After talking it over with Tom, I accepted his dad's kind offer, but this decision brought its own set of problems. Mary, who lived nearby, started dropping by uninvited and picking at everything. She'd nitpick about the cleanliness of the house or criticize my cooking. She even belittled my remote work, saying it wasn't real work and comparing me unfavorably to Emily, Tom's ex, who apparently excelled at everything domestic. These comments always seemed to come when Tom wasn't around. At first, I tried to defend myself, but Mary was expert at twisting my words, leaving me frustrated. Eventually, I realized engaging with her only stressed me out more, so I started brushing off her remarks and letting them slide. This seemed to annoy her even more, so she began resorting to more direct forms of harassment, like hiding community newsletters from me and withholding messages from neighbors. Her actions caused me to miss important community events, which landed me in trouble. One day, as I was folding laundry, she purposely messed it up or handled it with dirty hands, leaving stains. She'd help herself to food from my fridge without asking and even opened packages I'd ordered online, criticizing me for being wasteful. When her actions started causing actual damage, I reached my breaking point. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I decided to confront Mary directly. "Enough is enough, Mary. Even if you have issues because of Emily, this is going too far. Why do you keep harassing me like this? I stood firm, arms crossed, ready to confront her. Mary seemed surprised by my determination and quickly fired back. I faced challenges as a new bride too, but I never complained to my in-laws like you do. You're quite headstrong. Once you marry into a family, shouldn't you serve and respect your husband's parents? That's how it used to be. You think it's all right to treat me this way just because you went through it as a bride? I asked, stunned. Mary's response was chillingly firm. Yes, I do, and I won't stop. I can't accept someone like you as Tom's wife. If you don't like it, just divorce him and leave. Mary's words left me speechless with disbelief. It was clear that reasoning with her was futile. I didn't want to burden Tom, but it seemed I had no other option. When I finally opened up to him about his mother's behavior, he was distressed. What is my mother thinking? I've told her countless times not to bother you, and now she's dragging the neighbors into it. Bad-mouthing is one thing, but it's unacceptable when she starts interfering with our daily lives. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I'll have a serious talk with her. That night, Tom confronted Mary at our home. Despite her tearful protests, he stood his ground. Enough is enough. If this happens again, I won't forgive you. Thankfully, Mary stopped coming over for a while, giving us some much-needed peace. But it didn't last long. A week later, just when I thought things were settling down, the doorbell rang, and there stood Mary, wearing a wide smile. She was holding a cute teddy bear for some reason, and I couldn't quite figure out why. I thought, puzzled by the situation. Mary, what brings you here today? I asked. She seemed meek and apologetic as she responded, I'm sorry for everything. Tom scolding me made me realize how childish I was being, taking out my frustrations about Emily on you. I accepted her apology, albeit with confusion. Well, I'm glad you understand. Actually, I came to apologize properly. I realized I never gave you a proper wedding gift, so I thought this teddy bear would be nice. Isn't it cute? I wish you and Tom happiness, she said, offering me the bear. Though I thanked her, the gift didn't make much sense to me. I'm not particularly fond of teddy bears or stuffed animals in general. For a wedding gift, something practical like kitchenware or appliances would have been more appropriate, especially considering our recent conflicts. Could there be a hidden motive behind this gesture? Feeling uneasy, I decided to consult my mom, who lived nearby. I've confided in her about Mary's harassment before. When I showed her the teddy bear, her usually calm face lit up suddenly. Sarah, your dad brought some sweets as a souvenir. Let's put the teddy bear in the living room and have some coffee first. Help me get things ready, my mom said, her behavior seeming strange. Despite my unease, I went to the kitchen. As soon as I entered, my mom grabbed my shoulder with a serious expression. You need to get rid of that thing quickly. Otherwise, something terrible will happen. What? Why the sudden urgency? Is there something wrong with the teddy bear? I asked, confused. Calm down and listen. That stuffed animal is... After hearing her explanation, I was speechless at Mary's outrageous behavior. But at the same time, I ran out of patience. I understand now. Then I need to return the gesture, I said, placing the teddy bear in the living room and waiting for Tom to come home. When he saw it, he asked, Isn't it cute? Did you buy this? Welcome home. No, this is a wedding gift from your mother, I replied. From Mom? Why would she give a teddy bear? Tom asked, puzzled. I pulled him aside to explain the situation and asked for his help with my plan. He nodded in agreement. A few hours later, Tom and I found ourselves in a heated argument. You preferred Emily because she was nicer, just like your mom said. That's why you wanted to marry her, I accused him. I never said that. You're reading too much into it. Tom retorted, the argument escalating into harsh words. That's it. Marrying someone like you was a mistake. Let's get divorced right now, he declared. And just as he said that, Mary burst into our house. She stood at the doorway with a broad smile plastered on her face. Tom, you finally see the truth. She's the worst wife, strong-willed, not cute at all, and so presumptuous. I always knew she wasn't right for you. Divorce her immediately and kick her out of this house. Mary's delight quickly turned to confusion. Tom and I, who moments ago were supposedly locked in a fierce argument, now shared a cold gaze as we stared back at her. I addressed her slowly. You noticed we were fighting, didn't you? Mary stumbled in her response, attempting to cover up her timing to enter our home. It was just a hunch. I just felt it. she quickly defended, but her shifting eyes betrayed her. Don't lie. Tell the truth. You rigged a teddy bear with a surveillance camera and a bug, didn't you? I accused, revealing what my mom had noticed and told me about when I returned home. She had suspected something when she heard about Mary's gift, recalling a similar crime reported on the news involving a woman being spied on through a stuffed animal. Mary's expression froze in realization. On my way back, I went to the police station to report this. They should be arriving any minute now, I continued, watching as panic flickered across Mary's face. That's ridiculous. Don't joke about this. Calling the police over such a thing is an overreaction. Call them back and cancel it right now, she pleaded desperately. Planting cameras and listening devices in someone's home is a serious crime. It's your fault. You were so insolent that I felt I had to find something to hold over you. You are an outrageous woman. Mary tried to shift the blame, lashing out in anger. Tom finally reached his breaking point with his mother. Enough is enough. I've never been more ashamed to call you my mother. Mom, I thought you regretted mistreating Sarah, but then you pull something like this. Please don't be angry, Tom. I was doing it for you, Mary tried to explain. So committing a crime is justified. I shouldn't have been lenient just because you're my mother. I'm going to report this to Dad, and I'm cutting ties with you. Stay away from Sarah and me, Tom declared firmly. Mary began to scream, attempting to apologize through tears. Tom halted her. You're apologizing to the wrong person, he said, turning to me. Sarah, I'm sorry. I felt like I was losing Tom to you and made a foolish mistake. I deeply regret it. I won't oppose you again. Please forgive me, she pleaded desperately. But after everything she put me through, including the disturbing teddy bear incident, forgiveness was out of the question. I will never forgive you. I reached out to you multiple times and you ruined it. How could I forgive being given such a disgusting gift? Sorry might work for children, but as adults we must face the consequences of our actions, I told her firmly. Despite her continued pleas, neither Tom nor I felt any sympathy. Later the police arrived, giving her a stern warning. Weeks later, John divorced her and kicked her out of the house. Apparently he had long been frustrated with her reckless spending. Combined with her mistreatment of me and the teddy bear incident, he had had enough. Now she lives in a rundown apartment, struggling with multiple part-time jobs, a consequence of her actions. I hope she uses this opportunity to reconsider her choices and change for the better. As for me, I'm grateful to live in peace, surrounded by the kindness of Tom and John. In just a few months, we'll be welcoming our long-awaited baby into the world. We're filled with anticipation for the day our little one arrives.
Selena, since you're so busy with work and don't seem to manage the house chores or the kids properly, I've prepared dinner for everyone. Oh, don't worry about it. After all, I'm staying here, so let me at least cook as a way to say thanks. My mother-in-law, Lori, threw in her usual backhanded comment. It's hard to genuinely feel grateful when someone speaks to you like that. Lori's homemade spaghetti with meat sauce was packed with meat and looked incredibly rich. I tried to say, looks delicious, but froze in my tracks. Wait, I thought as I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand. Wait, is something moving? It wasn't the steam, it looked like the meat sauce itself was shifting around. Feeling a surge of fear, I quickly swapped my plate with Lori's. And of course, it was Lori who let out the scream moments later. In an instant, a piercing shriek echoed throughout the room. My name is Selena. I'm a housewife in my late 40s. I have 2 kids, a 15-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. While they aren't as demanding as they were when they were little, my days as a mom are still a whirlwind. Mom, I'm heading out. Can you pick me up later? Just as I got back from work, my daughter Michelle quickly left the house. Mom, I'm hungry. Joseph, my son, rubbed his stomach, having already finished off the big donut I left as a snack. It's routine whenever I get home from work. The kids flock around, calling out Mom, Mom. Part of me wants to say, Mom's tired too, you know, but it doesn't bother me much. Around 8 p.m., my husband, Charlie, gets home. Dad, can you stop looking at your smartphone while eating dinner? Joseph, who was playing a game nearby, couldn't help but scold him. Charlie always looks at his smartphone while eating, and he's constantly dropping food. Hey, you spilled some hamburger sauce on the floor. Can't you see it? Huh? Oh, I'll clean it up later. Joseph is just a grade schooler, but Charlie brushes off his scolding. I thought peaceful days like this would continue forever, at least until that night at 10 p.m. on a weekday. The doorbell rang loudly, and I thought, a delivery this late? As I checked the window, to my surprise, there stood Lori. I quickly opened the door and led Lori into the living room. I hurriedly threw the laundry that was on the sofa into the next room. Lori, what brings you here so late at night? Do I need a reason to come to my son's house? Right from the start, she was cold and combative. I could tell she was in a bad mood. Her sharp eyes turned toward the living room table. Oh, sorry about the mess. Joseph was doing his homework and fell asleep without putting his things away. Pencils, erasers, notebooks piled up, and an empty mug. Most noticeably, bits of eraser shavings were scattered everywhere. Feeling Lori's gaze, I smiled and hurriedly cleaned up. This place is always a mess whenever I visit. Once the living room table was clear, her eyes moved to the dining table and kitchen counter. Oh, sorry. It's from the dinner Charlie just had. I was about to smile and clean up when Lori suddenly raised her voice. What? Are you saying this is Charlie's fault? Her sudden outburst almost made me drop the dish in my hand. When your husband done eating, the wife should clean up right away, shouldn't you? Why are you making it sound like it's his fault? You're such an inconsiderate wife. I'm sorry. Lori, for all her refined manners, has a strong personality. Whenever we meet, I'm always wounded by her constant jabs and cutting remarks. Still, maybe Lori's comments are just normal for a mother-in-law. Whenever I visit my in-laws, I make sure to help with cleaning and tidying. And since takeout is often the meal of choice, I thought she was letting me take it easy. Back when my kids were younger, it was hard to move around. At times like that, Lori would become oddly kind. Selena, you and the kids are important guests. Please, sit down. Would you like me to make you some coffee? If I brought wine as a gift, she'd say, thank you. It's my husband's favorite. I don't like alcohol myself, though, in a sulky tone. Thinking that was a bad gift choice, I'd bring her favorite cake instead. But she'd always have one more comment. Bringing perishables to someone's house isn't very proper, is it? You didn't know that? Well, I'm not that fussy about those things, so I'll accept it. Thanks, Selena. I appreciate it. I'm not really hungry, but I'll eat it quickly since it's perishable. None of this was enough to cause a major problem. Lori always has a smile on her face. So her husband Ian and Charlie, who tend to be a bit clueless, probably don't even notice Lori's snide remarks. Besides, the more direct comments only happen when they aren't around. It's just your typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. Every family probably has something like this. But still, even small jabs can pile up and become a heavy burden. In other words, I find it hard to deal with Lori. So why did she come over so late at night? She brought a rather large bag. Maybe she came to drop off some food that was close to its expiration date. Either way, I just wished she'd finish her business and leave quickly. Huh, Mom, you're here. Just then, Charlie came out from the shower, tilting his head in confusion. He stood there in his underwear, water dripping from his head. Oh, is the shower free? I'm going to take one too. Selena, would you be a dear and get me a bath towel? Are you planning to take a shower here? I was startled, completely taken aback. Lori raised an eyebrow at my rude reaction, but only for a moment. "Oh, sorry to bother you when you're so tired," she said, with that calm, outwardly polite smile. So, are you planning to stay overnight?" I asked cautiously, my voice barely a whisper. Lori's smile widened. "Oh dear, did I forget to mention it earlier? My apologies. Yes, I'll be staying for a little while." I felt the blood drain from my face. A little while might mean 2 or 3 days, right? Or maybe a week? Or 10 days? I was too terrified to ask for clarification, so I just bit my lip and fell silent. The next day, I found out why Lori had barged in on us. "That's why, until Ian learns his lesson, I'm not going back," she said. Apparently, there had been a fight between Lori and Ian. From what I gathered, Ian's casual, "Could you help wash the dishes?" had sparked the whole thing. So basically, he thinks I've got nothing better to do. How insulting. He never bothered with house chores before, so why should I have to start now? The dishes were only the trigger clearly. Lori had pent-up frustrations with Ian. He can't even wash a dish properly. And his laundry skills, don't even get me started. The man's well past 70 and still completely useless. It's amazing he ever managed to hold down a job. Ian had retired after working for years, even past the usual age, as a part-time employee. At 70, he finally stepped down. I had assumed he was living a quiet, peaceful life with Lori now, but apparently, Lori expected Ian to take on household chores now that he was retired. To expect Ian to suddenly perform chores at the level Lori had mastered over decades seemed cruel. Now, let's be honest, there was no way Lori, as picky as she was, would just quietly stay at our house. The day after she came, Lori started giving me some helpful advice. "Selena, don't tell me you're serving cereal for breakfast. That's no good at all. Mornings should start with bread. Bread and soup wake up the brain and fill you with energy. Think about your family's health." Even so, there was no way I was making soup in the morning. Charlie and the kids barely had time as it was, so they preferred quick-to-eat cereal. "Wait a minute. Selena, are you really going to leave the house without cleaning first?" Just as I was leaving for work, Lori called out to me with a look of utter horror. "Housework should be finished in the morning. Don't use work as an excuse. Honestly, just spending one night in this messy house makes me feel unwell. Come on, don't make your guest uncomfortable. Clean up before you go." I had to bite back a scream. Impossible. If I listened to her, I'd be late for work. "I'll clean up when I get back," I tried to say. "What? Are you talking back to me?" Oh my, how terrifying. Such a strong-willed daughter-in-law. I had no time to deal with her. I hurriedly apologized and rushed out the door to work. There was a good chance Lori would clean up the house on her own. I dreaded the thought of her going through my drawers or closets. That night, I came home early only to find the house as messy as it was when I left. Despite being at her son's house, she hadn't touched a thing. I was just starting to feel relieved when she pounced. "Selena, come over here. Look, there's dust in the corner of the room, and hair, lots of it. Can you see it? And under the sofa, there's a balled-up sock. This is Charlie's, right? I bet he's been searching for the other one." Her critiques didn't stop there. Next, she dragged me into the kitchen. "Charlie's breakfast dishes are still sitting out. Look, you can see the coffee stains in the cup, and this plate smeared with jam. Just left like that, don't you think it'll attract bugs?" How was I supposed to clean the dishes Charlie used after I'd already left for work? Then she opened the freezer and let out a sigh. "You have a lot of frozen food in here. Do you not care about your family at all?" "I do care, but I just don't have time." I tried to tell her that it's not like we eat frozen food every day, but Lori didn't want to hear it. To top it all off, She opened the trash can. Look at all these frozen meal wrappers and candy wrappers. Poor Charlie and the kids. I never should have come home early. The kids were at their extracurricular activities, and Charlie was at work with just me and Lori. She didn't hold back. Now, let's start with cleaning. I really can't stand a dusty house. Oh, sorry, but Joseph will be home soon, so I need to make dinner before. I started to say, but her angry aura made me fall silent. The image of refined grandma cracked, revealing a challenging glare. What's that? So what? You're going to eat in the toilet? Have dinner in the trash can? Disgusting. In the end, I did what Lori told me and started cleaning. Anything I said would just come back at me twice as hard. I figured it'd be easier to comply than to argue, thinking it was only for a few days. Hey, is the house cleaner than usual today? It paid off, and Michelle noticed my hard work, but Charlie just tilted his head, saying, "Huh, well, the steak is great, Mom, thanks." Since cleaning had taken so much time, I hadn't managed to cook dinner, and so Lori had ordered steak delivery for the whole family. This steak is way bigger than what we usually have, so this is what good meat tastes like. The house was clean, and everyone was savoring the luxury steak we never usually got to eat. Everyone looked happy, smiling from ear to ear. It was true that Lori was the one who ordered the steak delivery, but as soon as Lori received the delivery at the door, she went straight back to her room, leaving me to scramble for my wallet. 5 premium steaks. It was a hefty expense. Lori basked in everyone's gratitude, looking quite pleased with herself. Later that night, I explained the truth to Charlie, but he didn't seem to take it too seriously. Hey, she just wants to look good for the kids once in a while, and Ed's coming to pick her up tomorrow, so it's no big deal. Somehow, Charlie had already gotten in touch with his dad. Knowing that this ordeal would end tomorrow gave me some hope. The next morning, Lori was as lively as ever. "Selena, I told you yesterday, why are you having cereal for breakfast again?" "Sorry, everyone here prefers cereal in the morning, but I made soup for you, Lori, so please enjoy it." Lori, clearly displeased, reluctantly accepted it. "Selena, what about the housework? Are you making time for the chores?" She expected me to do the laundry, vacuum, and mop the floors all before leaving for work. "Oh, and don't forget to clean the entrance and bathroom as well." "Sorry, but I don't have time in the morning. I'll clean when I get home. I'm heading out now." "Wait, Selena, it's sunny today. Hang out the sheets to dry. And Charlie's breakfast isn't ready yet. Are you just going to leave the dirty dishes until the evening again?" "I'm sorry, I really don't have time right now." The thought of her leaving today made me feel much lighter. "Don't be lazy. You'll get sick living in such an unsanitary house." I had cleaned like crazy last night. There was no way the house was dirty enough to cause sickness. Lori kept ranting until I was out the door. I hurried off to work, as if escaping. And then that evening, I came home, hoping that maybe Lori was gone. But unfortunately, Lori was still there. The only difference from the day before was the delicious smell wafting through the house. "Welcome back, Selena. You must be tired from work today," Lori said with a smile. It was impossible to sincerely reply with, "I'm home." "Selena, since you're so busy with work, you can't do the house chores or properly take care of the kids, so I've prepared dinner for everyone." "Oh, don't worry about it. After all, I'm staying here, so let me at least cook as a way to say thanks." Lori put on an exaggerated display of kindness. Joseph and Michelle said they wanted spaghetti with meat sauce, so I made it. There was some instant sauce in the cupboard, but you know I have the time, right? So I made it from scratch. "Selena, You're too busy to cook something like this yourself, aren't you? I just hope that my homemade taste suits everyone. Why does she have to be so passive-aggressive? Of course, I was thankful she had made dinner, but I just couldn't bring myself to say thank you. Is Charlie going to be late again tonight? Joseph is hungry, so let's eat first. Following Lori's lead, the kids and I sat at the dining table. You don't need to help. You must be tired, Selena. Just sit and wait, okay? In high spirits, Lori was being very helpful. She served the spaghetti with meat sauce to the kids first. Here's your portion, Selena. Thank you. Lori handed me a plate of spaghetti with meat sauce. It was packed with ground meat and looked incredibly rich. The steam rose from it, piping hot. Wow, it looks delicious. I tried to say it looked tasty, but froze mid-sentence. Wait. I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand. Wait. Is something moving? I muttered to myself. It wasn't the steam. It looked like the meat sauce itself was shifting around. Maybe I was just tired. Thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me, I blinked hard and looked up. And there she was, Lori, looking down at me, meeting my eyes. Selena, please, enjoy my delicious homemade meal. Eat to your heart's content. She stood there, her chin slightly raised, smiling. Her face seemed dark and shadowed, and it frightened me. Let's eat. Joseph's cheerful voice snapped me back to reality. Oh, I forgot a fork. Michelle noticed she didn't have a fork and tried to stand up. But Lori, with that angelic smile, gently spoke to her. Oh, don't worry about it, Michelle. You sit tight. Grandma will get it for you. With a light step, Lori turned around and opened the drawer filled with forks. She seemed to be in quite a good mood, humming a little tune as she did. Now's my chance. Lori's seat was right next to mine. Quickly, I swapped my plate with Lori's. Even though the kids were sitting right there, my body moved before I could think. Joseph sat there in shock at my sudden action. Michelle, still looking at her smartphone, didn't seem to notice. Here you go, forks for everyone, Lori said as she took her seat, handing out forks to each of us. Now, Selena, don't hold back. Enjoy yourself. I made this meal with all my love for you, who works so hard every day. Okay. I wasn't used to a kind Lori, so I couldn't help feeling awkward. Lori clutched her fork in her right hand, not taking her eyes off me. She was definitely expecting something. Let's eat. She was watching closely, trying not to miss the moment I took my first bite of the spaghetti. With her staring like that, it was hard to eat. I glanced over at Lori, and we locked eyes for about 3 seconds. It seemed like she realized she was staring too intensely. Oh, I was just worried if Selena would like the homemade taste. It's restaurant quality, you know. She made an odd excuse, and without looking away from me, wrapped her own fork around the spaghetti. She took a big bite. See, it's so delicious. I really have a talent for, Lori's mouth gaped as the spaghetti fell out. What? Her face, already red from eating, quickly turned pale. In the next instant, Lori went flying backward. It was like something out of a cartoon, with Lori practically flying through the air. It felt as if she'd been caught in some kind of explosion. The suddenness of it all left the kids and me frozen, holding our breath. We were so shocked that we couldn't even reach out a hand to help. Lori landed nearly 3 feet away, trembling on the floor. A bug, a bug. A loud, frantic scream echoed through the room. Right at that moment, the living room door swung open. Standing there were Charlie and Ian. What happened? We heard a loud noise. What they saw was Lori, eyes brimming with tears, desperately trying to explain, while the kids and I sat calmly at the table. It must have looked like a strange scene. Lori seemed unable to stand, dragging herself along the floor to cling to Ian's legs. A bug. There was a bug in the spaghetti. She was pleading frantically. A bug, Ian said with a puzzled look. And then, Michelle reached over to the plate of spaghetti Lori had been eating. Without hesitation, she stuck her fingers into it and lifted up a hidden bug. It's a cockroach. Ew, Michelle, don't touch something so gross. Joseph and Charlie both shouted, turning their faces away in disgust. The bug was completely covered in rich meat sauce. As Michelle lifted it, its legs twitched just a little. It seemed to be barely alive. Well, what is that? How did it get in my spaghetti? Why? Even though I was still confused about what was happening, Lori pointed her finger right at me. Selena, this is your doing, isn't it? With a face twisted in anger, Lori hurled her accusations at me. You put this in my spaghetti, didn't you? How cruel. Even if it's a fake bug, you wanted to scare me, didn't you? Clearly terrified, Lori's anger spilled over as tears ran down her face. She really looked like a victim, suddenly being blamed. Without understanding a thing, I stammered out a minor question. What are you talking about? I mean, a toy. That's a toy. The bug that Michelle held was slick with oil, glistening in a way that was all too lifelike. I didn't want to look at it. My body refused, and my eyes shut tight on their own. But somehow I caught a glimpse of it from the corner of my eye. Yay, it's a toy. Michelle wiped the oil off the bug with a towel without any hesitation. Revealed was a toy bug designed to resemble the much-hated pest, and powered by a simple wind-up mechanism. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't very realistic and looked like something you'd find at a dollar store. It's really a toy. Thank goodness. Even though it was just a toy, it was still disgusting, but I was genuinely relieved that it wasn't a real bug. With a sigh of relief, I ended up blurting out more than I intended. Oh, so a toy got mixed in. Well, the meat sauce that Lori made looked like it was moving, and it creeped me out, so I switched our plates. I'm sorry, Lori, for scaring you. I really had no idea there was a toy in it. Right after saying that, I regretted it and fell silent. Even if it was an impulsive move, swapping the plates because the food seemed creepy was careless. What did you just say? Ian's voice was cold and low. I'm sorry. I immediately apologized, but Ian's eyebrows shot up. No, Selena, I'm not looking for an apology from you. I want to know if you said that there was a toy bug planted in the meat sauce Lori made. Ian's anger was directed at Lori. What on earth did you do to Selena? His shout echoed through the room, tightening the atmosphere in an instant. No, wait, why? I didn't do anything. Selena is lying. The plate that got pranked was mine, right? I was the one who was affected. See, that means Selena did it. Flustered, Lori tried to prove her innocence, but Michelle shook the toy bug in her hand and asked, Oh really? Then, how did you know it was a toy from the start? Grandma, the bug was mostly buried in the meat sauce, and you wouldn't be able to tell at a glance. Everyone else thought it was real. Well, because, if you were the one who planted it, then it makes sense you'd know, right? Michelle's flat, disinterested tone made Lori bite her lip. The air felt heavy and suffocating. Tears welled up in Lori's eyes, and she sniffled. I didn't do it. I didn't. With Michelle Vian and me staring her down, Lori kept pleading her innocence, barely able to raise her voice. It made me think there was a reason she could only whisper. Oh, I know. Joseph broke the tense atmosphere with an unexpectedly cheerful voice. He clapped his hands like he had a great idea. Let's check for fingerprints. It seemed like he was about to start a detective game. Now that I thought about it, Joseph had once done a school project on fingerprints. With some powder from cosmetics, you could easily lift fingerprints at home. If we check the fingerprints on this toy bug, we'll know who did it. If we find prints that aren't Sis's, then that's the culprit. Lori, who had been crouching on the floor, suddenly sprang up. She quickly leaped up and snatched the toy bug from Michelle's hand. Fingerprints. Culprit? Oh, don't be ridiculous, she said, handling the gross toy all over. It was an obvious attempt to destroy evidence. Joseph, who had been feeling so clever with his idea, realized there'd be no way to take an accurate fingerprint now and frowned. But Michelle, remaining calm, pointed out, "Actually, I wiped that toy with a towel earlier, so you wouldn't be able to get fingerprints anyway." Lori's face brightened. "Right, exactly, Michelle. So smart, so clever. Come on, let's just drop this whole culprit nonsense. I'm not lying, but accusing Selena. Wouldn't that be, mean, right?" Her words, betraying her nervousness, were practically an admission of guilt, but without concrete proof. It was all just circumstantial. I was starting to think it'd all be brushed under the rug when Michelle spoke again. "It's okay, Joseph. If we want fingerprints, we might find them somewhere else. Maybe the toy's packaging is still in the trash." "Ah!" Lori let out an exaggerated scream. As Joseph moved to open the trash can, Lori stepped in to stop him. No, you can't." "Why not, Grandma? Does it mean you really did something to Mom?" "No, that's not it. But no. No means no." Lori's raw, emotional display made her look pitiful. She probably only meant to cause a little trouble for me, and never imagined it would blow up like this. Standing in front of the trash can, Lori stomped her foot in frustration. Seeing this, Michelle gently held Joseph back. "Joseph, it's a hassle to check for fingerprints, so maybe we shouldn't. But if we don't find out who did it, then Mom." Joseph didn't want to check the fingerprints out of curiosity. He just wanted to prove my innocence. That thought made me happy. As long as my kids believed in me, it didn't matter if anyone else had doubts. Even without fingerprints, we know who did it. Joseph's voice was full of hope. Lori, on the other hand, choked and held her breath. "What?" "All right then," Michelle said as she reached for her smartphone on the table. "I have a video, actually." "A video of what?" Sweat ran down Lori's face as she reached out a trembling hand towards Michelle. Still in her usual calm, laid-back manner, Michelle swiftly moved away from Lori. "What video?" "Oh, just Grandma laughing while cooking up the meat sauce." Michelle, with a calm confidence, pressed play on her smartphone. Displayed on the screen was Lori, cackling like a wicked witch stirring a cauldron of poison. The Lori in the video wore a smirk that could only belong to a villain. However, the video alone wasn't enough to prove Lori had planted the toy bug. Then, Michelle began playing a second video. "No, stop it, that's not true." It wasn't surprising that Lori panicked. The new footage showed her opening the package containing the toy bug. In the video, she appeared to be having a blast, her laughter uncontainable. She pinched the bug's antenna with her fingertips, her face scrunched in distaste. "Oh, so gross. Even as a toy, I hate looking at it." Despite her words, her lips curled into a pleased smile. If this little thing popped out of some delicious spaghetti, I wonder what face Selena would make. She might faint from shock. I can't wait to see. She laughed with glee as she gripped the creepy toy bug tightly in her hand. That's when Michelle paused the video. "I also filmed you playing around with the toy. And I got footage of the bug moving around in Mom's spaghetti after you served it to everyone. Want to watch it?" "I don't want to see it," Lori screamed without a moment's hesitation. No. Well, I think this is enough evidence anyway. Faced with an unexpected and thorough takedown by her granddaughter, Lori was at a loss. Embarrassment, shame, and anger seeped from her entire body as she began to cry, hiding her face in her hands. Even as Grandma sat there, curled up and sobbing, not a single person reached out to comfort her. Everyone just stared down at Lori's pitiful form. "I've known for a long time that you've been saying mean things to Mom," Michelle said with a bored, uninterested tone. "So when you suddenly offers to make dinner after doing nothing to help around the house all these times she's visited, it was suspicious." And that sly grin she had on her face pretty much gave it away. "So yay, I thought I should record everything. You know, just in case." Michelle dismissed Lori's plea with a disinterested tone. There was no more room for excuses. Even if some might feel sympathy for the crying grandma, Ian showed no mercy as he helped Lori to her feet. How could you do something so cruel?" Between sobs, Lori cast a hateful glare in my direction. It had been nearly 20 years since Charlie and I got married. All the resentment from those 20 years showed in her eyes. Because she's such an arrogant daughter-in-law. Just because she works, she neglects Charlie's needs. And the house, even when she cleans a little, it's still so messy. Poor Charlie. Lori had been a stay-at-home wife her whole life. To her, I must have seemed like a lazy wife, using work as an excuse to shirk my responsibilities. "I just wanted to show you how dirty this house is, that bugs could get into the food." Maybe I went a little too far, but it was all out of concern. I just wanted to help Charlie, living in such an unsanitary place. To Lori, Charlie may have been a grown man with his own family, but he was still her precious son. And in her mind, that precious son was suffering because of a lazy wife. It was Lori's maternal instinct that led to this whole debacle. As Lori shed tears to gain sympathy, Ian let out a big sigh and cradled his head in his hands. "This house isn't unsanitary. For a working family with kids, it's actually quite clean. I guess what you want is a house so perfect it looks like a housekeeper lives here." Huh, that was true. Just as Ian said, the in-laws' house always looked as if a professional housekeeper had cleaned it to perfection. Even if Lori was a housewife, her efforts were commendable. Ian's next words, though, were unexpected and somewhat meddlesome. "If you think Charlie's house is so unclean it's sad, why don't you go ahead and clean it yourself?" What Ian probably intended as a kind suggestion was, in reality, a huge imposition. I hurriedly held up both hands in protest, but what Ian said next made me doubt my ears. "Go ahead. Send a housekeeper to this place too." What? Lori's sobbing came to an abrupt halt. She stood there, mouth agape, staring at Ian in shock. "What? How? How did you know?" It turned out that Lori's impeccable housekeeping was actually the work of a professional housekeeper. Judging by Ian's tone, it seemed like she was the only one who thought she was pulling off the charade flawlessly. "Oh yeah," Charlie said. "I remember sometimes bumping into a lady who Mom called her friend. She'd come over when I got home from school. Now that I think about it, she was probably the housekeeper. No wonder she always had an apron on and greeted me so politely." Charlie recounted how he would occasionally see this woman, who was likely the housekeeper, whenever he came home. He had thought that the house was just extra tidy because Lori was excited to have a guest over. "It's costing us a few $100s each month. You handle the finances, but did you really think I wouldn't notice? Sure, I let it go because a clean house feels nice. But what's with your behavior since I retired?" Lori looked stunned. "Is it that I'm home now, so you can find time to bring in the housekeeper? Or did you stop because we don't have enough income anymore? Either way, I'm the one who's paying for it. Since Ian retired, Lori had been making him do the housework, complaining about his poor skills. Of course, he could never match the work of a professional housekeeper, and it turned out she was pushing all the chores onto him. Lori's logic was, well, I did all the housework until now, so now it's your turn. The usually quiet Ian endured the housework as practice, but when he finally asked Lori to help out, it erupted into a fight. That's how Lori ended up storming out and landing at our doorstep. Selena, I'm so sorry my wife caused trouble for you. And Michelle, Joseph, I'm sorry you had to go through all of this too. Ian apologized over and over before dragging a sulking Lori away. After they left, an awkward atmosphere hung over our house. Then Joseph broke out laughing. No way. Mom, you have to see this. Curious, we all peered into the trash can where Joseph was pointing. Inside were a few empty packages of meat sauce. They were from a well-known chef's line, the kind sold at the supermarket, but a bit too pricey to buy casually. She just added ground meat and simmered it. I saw her do it. No wonder it tasted so good. No way. Grandma's wild. Whether or not he fully grasped the situation, Joseph burst out laughing. Even Charlie joined in, laughing along. Such a carefree father and son duo. Michelle, on the other hand, stayed calm and snorted. If Grandma wanted to be a perfect housewife, maybe she should have been a perfect mom too. She raised Dad to be all sloppy and carefree. Michelle giggled, and just as she said, Charlie always dropped food while eating, and he tossed his clothes around wherever he pleased. When I pointed it out, he'd just laugh it off. He wasn't a bad person, but it was like taking care of another child sometimes. Then again, I'm not a perfect housewife or mother either. And while Charlie's laid-back attitude sometimes annoyed me, it also helped me stay grounded. After that, Ian and Lori got divorced. The catalyst was something trivial, but Lori stubbornly insisted she was not at fault and refused to have a meaningful discussion, leading to the worst possible outcome. Why divorce? I've always done my best for this family. Having a housekeeper was my way of keeping a proper home. It was all for Ian and Charlie. I did nothing wrong. If she had just been honest and apologized and agreed to work with Ian on sharing housework, their future could have been different. But there was no chance of her barging back into our lives after their divorce. Lori ended up moving back to her family home, where she now lives quite an inconvenient life. Her parents had passed away, so she was taken in by her brother and his wife. The strong-willed wife had Lori doing housework under a strict if you don't work, you don't eat philosophy. But that wasn't the only thing that restricted her life. Lori's body had grown weaker, too. One night, Lori called our house, sounding drained from her new post-divorce life. Is that you, Selena? My life is over, and it's all your fault when you put that bug toy in my spaghetti. Did you know I had broken my leg then? The doctor says it's healed, but it still hurts. I can't even walk properly. Now I'm divorced and can't move my body like I used to. Why do I have to go through this? It's all because of you. At the time of the bug incident, Lori was so panicked she didn't even notice her pain. It wasn't until later that they found the fracture, and even after treatment, she never fully regained mobility in her leg. That said, she could still walk with a limp. And considering her age, at least she wasn't bedridden, which was a silver lining in itself. I'd rather be bedridden. Why do I have to do chores with my bad leg? Just because my great-grandkids are coming over, they have me cleaning the floors. It's too much, too much. Selena, I'm begging you, forgive me, I'll apologize. Her grumbling suddenly turned to whining. It didn't seem like she even knew what she was apologizing for. Your apology is unnecessary. How heartless, Selena. Here I am apologizing to you. Since it was a late-night call, I was tired and hung up coldly. It seemed like Lori was pleading for my help, but she never once said the words "I'm sorry," so I felt no need to help her. The phone rang again shortly after, but I let it go to voicemail and ignored it. By the next day, I had blocked her number. I have no interest in what happened to her after that. While I no longer had contact with Lori, my time with Ian increased. Now retired, Ian would occasionally invite our family over and cook for us. Grandpa's grilled fish is so good. Did you catch this fish yourself, Grandpa? Well, that's impressive. Free from work and Lori's demands, Ian now had all the time in the world to enjoy his new hobbies: fishing, hiking, gardening, and most of all, cooking. At first, I thought housework was way tougher than any job, but once I got the hang of it, it's pretty fun. And seeing Joseph and Michelle eat my food with such joy makes it all worth it. While the house isn't spotless, like a professionally cleaned home, it's comfortable and filled with life, with fish prints adorning the walls. Hey Charlie, it's not like men these days don't have to do housework. You know, you better step up, too. Caught off guard, Charlie choked on his rice. Michelle, Joseph, and I all burst out laughing at his reaction. Hey, I can at least wash some dishes. Charlie, visibly flustered, made me laugh even more. The room filled with the warm, happy laughter of our family. In the dim light of the evening, inside the room, the doorbell rang. I wiped the tears streaming down my cheeks and looked toward the entrance. My mother-in-law, Talia, and my sister-in-law, Jacqueline, stood side by side. Oh, they've come to help. I hurried towards the entrance. Opening the door, I was stunned. Come on, please. Bring them in. Talia's voice directed people who appeared to be movers. Excuse us, we're coming in. And they entered the house. What? Wait, what's going on? Hearing my bewildered voice, my son Joel, who was in his room upstairs, hurried down the stairs. What's happening, Mom? Joel asked, watching the movers bustling around. Well, I turned back to Joel, confused, when Talia and Jacqueline spoke up. We're taking my son's house. You guys need to leave. Yeah, that's right. Get out now. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, Neil, efficiently directed the movers, and the boxes were carried into the living room, as well as the other rooms, one after another. Suddenly, Joel, his face turning pale, exclaimed, No, you can't do that. Don't you know, aunties? His face was ghostly pale. This house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted. Neil turned around, and the movers stopped in their tracks. Catching everyone's attention, Joel shook with a tremor. My name is Jade, 41 years old. My husband, Scott, was a 42-year-old company employee. He had a calm nature and doesn't indulge in alcohol, smoking, or gambling. He worked diligently every day for our family. Scott's hobby was watching movies with me on weekends. Until last year, our son Joel used to join us, but since starting middle school, he preferred spending weekends with his friends over us. While I felt a bit lonely, Scott seemed to find it endearing. He fondly recalled not following his parents' advice to go to a prestigious school, his time as a class representative and student council president, and talked about his high school best friend. Jackson was your best friend, right? You've always been a top student, haven't you? I teased. Scott laughed. If my parents heard that, they'd be outraged. squinting his eyes while reminiscing. "Still, I had a great time in school," he murmured. "Are you having fun now?" I asked while watching a rented DVD at home. "Yeah, I am," Scott answered simply. Then, looking around the living room, "No," he corrected himself. "It's more than fun. It's happiness. We chose and bought this house ourselves. I have a kind wife and a healthy son." His face, clearly showing that there's nothing more I want, from the bottom of his heart made me blush. "That's where you say beautiful wife." I swung my arm in mock frustration, and Scott dodged with a laugh. All right. I'm happy with my beautiful wife. All I need to do now is work hard to pay off that mortgage." We were still paying off our home loan. Scott had arranged the loan so that I, a housekeeper, wouldn't need to work. I'm the lucky one to have such a kind husband, I thought to myself, watching the DVD next to Scott. Scott would always say that our married life is happy, but I can't help but think it wasn't quite happy for him back when he was living at his parents' house before we got married. It's apparent to anyone that he didn't get along well with his parents and his sister, Jacqueline. I heard the whole issue started when Scott didn't attend the high school his parents wanted him to go to. Jacqueline, who is 2 years older than him, obediently enrolled in the high school chosen by their parents. She went to college and even got a job at a company her parents approved of, just as they wanted. My sister has become incapable of thinking or deciding for herself. According to Scott, that's how it was. It's easy to just do as your parents say, but then you become a person who can't act without their instructions. You lose the ability to adapt to situations and make your own decisions. As expected, once Jacqueline started working at the company, she couldn't do anything without being told what to do, felt uncomfortable, and quit within a year. Then, her parents quickly arranged her marriage to Lance, my brother-in-law. Even though Scott was there, they made Lance their adopted son-in-law and lived with him. To me, it doesn't make sense to adopt a son-in-law when you already have a capable son like Scott. And it's not like Neil's family was that wealthy or anything. Neil was just a regular company employee. I didn't see the need for them to struggle financially to send their kids to a preparatory school. That's just my mother and father putting on a show, Scott would say. Apparently, there was a wealthy family living nearby, and their daughter was the same age as Jacqueline. When they were younger, they used to play with the neighborhood kids, but that changed once they started attending preparatory school. Nothing in particular happened between them and that family, but Scott's parents envied that girl and her family. Determined to send their own children to a preparatory school, they saved up diligently and managed to enroll Jacqueline into one. As a result, their dinners were humble, except for Jacqueline's luxurious sandwiches, a rather odd dietary life. Not seeing the need for such a struggle, Scott chose to attend a local high school. I think that was the right decision. But his parents were furious, and from that day, their attitude towards Scott noticeably changed. They used to beam with vanity when mentioning the high school Jacqueline attended. When people would remark, "I bet your son is too," they might have felt embarrassed admitting he went to a local school. But there's no need to dream of a higher standard of living than necessary. The in-laws and Jacqueline's family of 3 kids lived in a rented house. Not that there's anything wrong with renting, but I do wonder if they could have spent their money more effectively instead of just for appearances. They even went into debt to send Jacqueline to a preparatory school and college, and they're still paying it off. I could never understand their way of thinking or their sense of money. This also applied to the allowances given to the kids. The difference in the amount given to Jacqueline's kids and to Joel, our son, was blatantly obvious. It might be a difference in affection for the grandchildren living with them, but I can't help feeling sorry for Joel. It makes me sigh to think that even Joel is affected by this. It seems that they also didn't like the fact that we owned our house. A 2-story single-family home. Our house is bigger than the in-laws'. Showing off with a study, huh? This house is too nice for you. They often came over to our place and made such snide remarks. On top of that, they'd make sarcastic comments like, "Look, there's a stain here," or "the flooring is discolored," and so on and so forth. They would also nitpick. "It's not that impressive after all," they would complain. I really don't see the point of them doing that. If they don't like it, they shouldn't come over. According to Scott, they're just jealous, or so he said. They're envious because they don't have money, and we bought a house, even though we're paying a mortgage. Scott laughed, saying it's all because of their strange habit of keeping up appearances. Lance must have been earning a decent salary. Neil, who was in his 60s, was still working, but their debt repayment was holding them back. "Don't worry about it," Scott said, but Talia and Jacqueline would come over when Scott or Joel weren't around. Lately, they've been walking around our house freely while I prepare coffee. This should be our bedroom. My husband likes this room. This room is spacious. Maybe it could be a study room for the kids? They'd exchange such comments with each other. "What are you doing?" When I finally let my discomfort show, they just smirked and said, "Oh dear, we were just looking around." "Yeah, and you take your sweet time making coffee." I closed the door of the room they were snooping in and had them return to the living room. When Talia asked for a spare key, I felt a bit scared. I couldn't possibly give a spare key to Talia, who walks around someone else's house uninvited. There's a chance she could enter our house when no one is around and rummage through drawers and closets. I thought it was so selfish of them to ask for a spare key when they treated Scott so poorly. I'll have to talk to Scott about that. I dodged the question and had Scott call later to firmly refuse the request. How could you deny a key to your own parents? Talia was furious, but unfortunately, it's his parents who are untrustworthy, so it can't be helped. Anyhow, just come over when either Jade or myself are at home, Scott said, ending the call. Good health is the most important thing. It's a saying we often hear. At this age, I suddenly felt the weight of those words. Scott was diagnosed with cancer. After feeling unwell in his stomach and getting tested, we were lost for words. Each test revealed more cancer spread throughout his body. The doctor said that without surgery, he only had a few months to live. We had insurance, but it wasn't enough. We had to deal with not only the hospital bills, but living expenses and our mortgage too. The happiness we had built fell apart in an instant. I was trembling with fear of losing Scott and the uncertainty of our future. I didn't know what to do and was just scared. I'll ask my parents for help. My parents had already passed away. Being an only child, I had no other family to turn to. Okay, I'll go too. We told Scott's parents, Jacqueline and her husband, about his condition and asked for financial help. Cancer can be treated pretty easily these days, right? Jacqueline didn't seem to grasp the situation. The in-laws were hesitant about giving financial aid, though not as much as Jacqueline. I thought I heard you finished paying off your debt a few months ago. Yeah, we finally managed to. Please, we will definitely pay you back. Lend us the money for the surgery and hospitalization. The money you are going to spend on my education, lend it to us now. Please. I will work too, Please just help us," we begged, going on our knees and crossing our hands together. No way. We've only just started being able to afford some luxuries recently. I have insurance that will waive the mortgage if I die. Should that happen, I'll even sell the house to pay back what we borrowed from you. We'll write a memorandum too." We pleaded again and again. But despite somewhat expecting it, we were devastated when Scott's parents shook their heads, refusing to help. "In that case, why don't you just sell the house now?" Of course, we knew that might be our only option eventually. But if we were to sell it then, we would have to make sure that the money we make can cover hospital bills, treatment costs, and even the rent for a new place for us after subtracting the remaining mortgage. I heard that before we got married, Scott used to send money home to his parents, even after he had moved out. It seemed only fair that they could spend a little money for Scott now. No matter how much we pleaded, my in-laws and Jacqueline's answers didn't change. Scott straightened his back and replied in a flat voice, "Understood. That's fine." As we were leaving, "Wait a minute," Lance caught up with us. "This isn't nearly enough, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't have any savings," and he handed Scott $1,000. Of course, he wouldn't have savings. He was helping with the debt repayment. Despite their boastful claims of, "We finally paid it off," it was also thanks to Lance. I'll try to persuade them again. Please don't lose heart. We thanked Lance deeply for his kind words. "Thank you. Just the thought is enough." But still, do you have a plan? Yes, like my sister said, we're thinking of selling the house. Really? I couldn't help but exclaim. Selling the house isn't simple. There are many procedures to go through, and it will take time. There wouldn't be enough time for Scott's hospitalization, which was in a few days. Even if we managed to sell it, we would need to find a new place to live. It's not going to be easy or quick. Don't worry. I just remembered someone who might be able to help, Scott said, smiling at me. Scott fought hard with the cancer for 2 years since the diagnosis. Despite being given only a few months to live, we made many happy memories as a family of 3, in and out of the hospital. We had grown distant with my in-laws, but when the doctor said he probably can't return home, I contacted them. They visited a few times, but they would just say, "He still looks okay," in a cold manner, and go back home right away. It's as if they were just coming to see how much longer Scott has left. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. Surely not. Contact his family, the doctor said. The time had finally come. I called Talia hastily. Oh my gosh, I need to hurry. Yes, it's urgent. You must come to his room right away. Huh? Oh, okay. I'll come if I can. The call ended abruptly, and I returned to Scott and Joel in the hospital room. Only Lance, who came directly from work, and Scott's best friend Jackson showed up. Scott barely opened his eyes, but looked happy to see everyone before closing them for the last time. Lance and Jackson helped with the funeral arrangements. Lance stayed with Scott while Jackson drove Joel and I home so that we could get ready. It was morning when we left the hospital, but the sun had already started to set. We hadn't even cleaned up after breakfast because we had left in a hurry. I turned on the lights in the dim house in the evening. I sat down in the living room and flipped through a photo album. Tears flowed as I looked through it. I wiped the tears falling onto the table and chose a photo of Scott out of all the memorable photos. The doorbell rang. I wiped the tears from my cheeks and looked at the entrance. Talia and Jacqueline were standing side by side. Oh, they've come to help. Even though they didn't make it in time for Scott's final moments, I hurried to the entrance, thankful they came. But I was stunned when I opened the door. "Come on, bring everything in." Talia's voice directed people who appeared to be movers. "Excuse us, we're coming in." And they entered the house. "What? Wait, what's going on?" Hearing my bewildered voice, my son Joel, who was in his room upstairs, hurried down the stairs. "What's happening, Mom?" he asked, watching the movers bustling around. "Well," I turned back to Joel, confused, when Talia and Jacqueline spoke up. "We're taking my son's house. You guys need to leave." "Yeah, that's right. Get out now." Meanwhile, Neil efficiently directed the movers, and the boxes were carried into the living room, as well as the other rooms, one after another. Suddenly, Joel, his face turning pale, exclaimed, "No, you can't do that. Don't you know aunties?" Joel's face was ghostly pale. "This house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted." Neil turned around, and the movers stopped in their tracks. Catching everyone's attention, Joel shook with a tremor. In the midst of all this, a figure comes in through the entrance. "What the heck are you doing, bringing stuff into my house without permission? Get it out right now." Everyone jumped up at the sound of Jackson's angry voice, which seemed to echo throughout the house, or rather, the entire neighborhood. The movers began taking the stuff they had just brought in back outside, without checking with my in-laws, their customers. Not knowing what to do with the boxes, they just left them on the street in front of the house. "No, my desk." I heard my nephew's voice and turned to see Lance standing there with his 3 children. The children, seeing their belongings abandoned on the street, made complaints one after another, while Lance asked Jacqueline, "I came over when I heard about the sudden move, but what's this all about?" Although Lance is usually mild-mannered, he was furious. "What? But Mom said we were moving." "What are you talking about? You agreed too." In the midst of an ugly argument between mother and daughter, Lance coldly declared, "I can't deal with you all anymore. We're getting a divorce." "What? Wait, what are you saying?" Lance negotiated directly with the movers to take only his and the children's belongings to his parents' house. "Sorry for the trouble at such a difficult time. I'll have them take the kids and our stuff to my parents' place." Without giving Jacqueline a second glance, Lance and the kids left with the movers. Jacqueline collapsed crying on the road, and the in-laws stood dumbfounded among the remaining belongings. The neighbors came out to see what was happening, turning the situation into a nightmare. "Can we at least move these inside so they're not in the way?" I nodded at his words. "Yes, that's fine. This is your house, after all." "What do you mean?" The in-laws stared at us, confused. This is the truth. The day after being refused financial help by my in-laws 2 years ago, Scott brought home with him a very tough-looking man. That man was Jackson. He ran a real estate business and even gave me his business card. I was told that he was a high school classmate of Scott's. Not only was his face tough-looking, but he had an intimidating vibe, so I couldn't help but imagine that he was involved with shady business. Joel got frightened and clung to me tightly, even though he was already in middle school. I glanced at Scott with concern. Noticing my gaze, Scott tilted his head and then laughed as if he just realized something. "It's okay. Jackson might look scary, but he's a respectable member of society now." "Now?" That's when Joel timidly pointed it out. Jackson's eyes widened, and he smacked Scott's head. Scott was ill, for God's sake. I couldn't believe it, but Scott just laughed heartily. Joel looked so pale that I was worried if he was even breathing. Jackson, you didn't even come to our wedding, even though I sent you an invitation. And you never pay us a visit, even though I invite you over. I suddenly remembered. The name Jackson often came up in Scott's stories about his school days and when he went out drinking. From the stories, he seemed like a good friend, so I never imagined this was the same person. You can see why. My looks scare people, so showing up at your wedding or visiting would just cause trouble. Is that why you're still single? I'll hit you again. I could tell from their light banter that this was indeed the Jackson that Scott had been talking about. I couldn't help but chuckle at their conversation. Both stopped and looked at me. Sorry. It's just that Scott is so excited, like a child. Huh? He's always like this. Jackson, remember, Joel is here too. A father's dignity is important. Dignity, huh? That's something you've never had. Joel's remark lightened the mood. I told Jackson that Scott was really disappointed he didn't come to our wedding and that we want him to visit anytime. Thank you. Now, let's move on to business. We don't have the luxury of time. Jackson's demeanor changed suddenly to a serious expression. First, let me look at the condition of the house. Jackson went around checking each room. Once he finished examining the exterior walls and the meter box, he pulled out his laptop and started typing something. After a while, he showed us the screen. How about this amount for the selling price? I was taken aback by the amount he proposed. It was higher than what we had paid when we bought it. It's a very generous appraisal, but can we really sell it for this price? It's been about 10 years since we moved in, and there would be no point if it doesn't sell. We hadn't renovated it in years. Like Talia and Jacqueline said, there are stains here and there. I heard about that from Scott. They were talking about what they were going to do with each room, right? Yes. That means they think it's still perfectly habitable. Don't worry, it will sell for this price. Full of confidence, Jackson assured us. You can trust him. Scott added. Understood. Please proceed with this price. As I agreed, Jackson quickly spread several documents on the table. Oh, and we need to find somewhere else to live. At my words, Jackson responded, Sure, with a smile. He laid out rental agreement papers as well. First, I will buy this house directly. That solves one problem. Then, I'll rent it back to you. There, the second problem is also solved. Huh? I was taken aback, but Jackson continued, I'll transfer the money from the sale into your account within a few days. From there, we can pay off the remaining loan. Jackson smiled reassuringly. It was a boyish smile that made his earlier intimidating impression vanish. As we filled out the documents, I noticed the rental fee. $100? Both Scott and Joel looked surprised too, peering over the document. Shouldn't it be $1,000? Scott said. It's a typo, right? And as we laughed, it's not a mistake, Jackson said. What? I owe that much to Scott, after a moment of thought. No, you don't, Scott said. But Jackson told me about their high school days. Jackson was a real delinquent back then. He had been in trouble with the police several times and was often in fights, which left his mother in tears. One day, his mother, a single mom, was hospitalized. She had fainted from stress and exhaustion. Rushing to the hospital, Jackson was shocked to see how frail and small his mother had become. He realized it was his fault and bawled his eyes out like a child. After that, he changed his ways, stopped getting into fights, and stayed out of trouble with the police. But then one day, a cigarette butt was found on the rooftop of the school building. It caught fire in a nearby dumpster and caused a small blaze. This became a problem at school, and they assumed Jackson, who had a bad reputation, was the culprit. No matter how much he denied it, saying, "It's not me," no one believed him due to his past behavior. He was at risk of being expelled. When his mother burst into tears again, Scott believed in Jackson's innocence. He was the only one who believed in my innocence. He was the student council president at the time. We were in the same class, but had never really talked before. Jackson reminisced, saying Scott had protested to the principal, did some investigation among the students, gathered evidence, and found the real culprit. But you had insisted you didn't do it, right? Naturally, I believed him. No way. But thanks to you, I graduated high school and gave back to my mother. I even became the president of a company. That's why Jackson said he owed that much. The three of us, as a family, exchanged glances and gratefully accepted the rent proposal. This was what happened that day 2 years ago. As Joel said, I own this house now and am renting it to this family. If you don't believe me, I'll show you the documents later. Jackson glanced at Joel, then turned back to the in-laws with a smile. However, either family is welcome to rent the house. Shall I offer you a bargain? Jackson smiled at my astonishment. I'll also introduce you to new properties. After the funeral, we moved out of the house and into an apartment Jackson had recommended. Just unpack the bare essentials. We'll probably be able to move back to that house soon, Jackson said with a mischievous smile. And I asked him what made him think so. Joel, curious too, came closer to us. I actually thought about kicking them out that day, but then I changed my mind. Listen, here's the plan. Jackson leaned in, as if sharing a secret with us. 3 days later, we went back to our old home saying, we left a couple of things behind, under the pretense that we were retrieving them. Talia reluctantly offered snacks when Jackson joined us. How's the new place? Not bad at all. Neil replied contentedly. Really? Joel asked. Yes, really. No noises from the empty stairs? Or in the shower room? Joel looked around the living room fearfully. Right, Joel said there were ghosts, didn't he? I don't think Mom knows about it, but ever since Dad got hospitalized, I started to hear strange noises. Once, I saw the hem of a skirt on the stairs, thinking Mom was back, but no one was there. That's ridiculous. Talia's words were cut off as Joel and Jackson simultaneously looked upstairs. Is there someone on the second floor? That was impossible. Jacqueline completely lost her vigor after her divorce with Lance was finalized. Although she was silent, she was in the living room. What? Stop with this nonsense. I didn't hear anything. Joel and Jackson exchanged glances and hurriedly packed up. That's good to hear. We'll take our leave then. They rushed out of the house and quickly got into the car. The in-laws, who had come to see us off at the entrance, looked frightened. In the car, we burst into laughter. Jackson's plan was to use the lie about ghosts that Joel had made up on the spot. This is for treating Scott poorly for so long. Where in the world do you find a parent or sister neglecting their dying son and getting ready to move into his house? I couldn't agree more with the words that Jackson spat out while he was driving. Jackson and Joel played such pranks on them repeatedly. Eventually, it was even said that mysterious incidents that neither of them had even mentioned would occur in that house. The in-laws and Jacqueline got creeped out, mistaking the noises in the house for poltergeists. They complained to Jackson and Joel, but we never experienced such things. Jumping to conclusions can be a scary thing, Joel said, laughing. Eventually, the in-laws and Jacqueline couldn't stand it anymore and moved out of the house. They rented a place within their budget, introduced by Jackson. Ah, that was just business. I made sure to find them a decent, budget-friendly old apartment, Jackson said with a sly smirk, and Joel and I applauded. By the way, Jacqueline, after divorcing Lance, had to start working again to pay child support. Seems like she's getting a taste of the harshness of society. I wish her all the best now that she has to single-handedly take care of her parents who had looked after her. Eventually, we returned to the house we bought with Scott. Although we couldn't buy it back, we still live there for a rent of $100. Lance and his 3 kids have started to visit again. Jacqueline seems to be asking for reconciliation, but Lance is not considering it at all. Once a month, Jackson comes over to collect the rent. He times it with Scott's monthly anniversary. After looking at Scott's photo, we have dinner together, and he even listens to Joel's troubles, now a high school student. And Joel and I have a little secret joy. It's the stories about Scott's school days that we hear occasionally at dinner. We hear so many stories that we never knew about, and we learn new things about Scott. I'm sure Scott is smiling with us around the dining table. "No way, come on," Scott would say, making childish excuses.
"Shut up, you useless. Hurry up and make me some food." My son, Mark, spat those words at me, hurling insults. Oh no, here we go again. Another day in this hellish situation. Thinking that, I tried to make myself small, attempting to escape from his look of disgust. He just turned 24 this year. I struggled to put him through college. And he finally got a job 2 years ago, supposedly becoming a full-fledged adult. He used to be such an adorable and precious son. That is, until this abnormal rebellious phase began. I'm pretty sure it started back when he was in high school. I don't know what he's so irritated about, but the slightest thing that displeases him causes him to shout, yell, and throw things. I kept telling myself it was just puberty and tried not to get too angry, but maybe that was a mistake. Even after the usual period of teenage rebellion had passed, there were no signs of his defiant attitude coming to an end. Well, that's not quite right. It seems his irritation is mainly directed at me. Ever since he started working, he respects my husband Daniel, who became a company executive. He even looks at him with admiration. But the moment he lays eyes on me, he gives me this look mixed with contempt and scorn, full of hatred. I don't know what he hates so much about me, but whenever Daniel is away on business trips, Mark hurls terrible insults at me. How did it end up like this? Where did I go wrong in raising him? As I kept dwelling on those thoughts, I ended up falling ill. I was diagnosed with influenza and went home with a high fever, my mind in a haze. Then I collapsed onto the bed, practically losing consciousness. "Hey, wake up!" A grating shout and violent shaking caused me to groggily open my eyes. His face was twisted in an ugly scowl as he noisily demanded that I make him food. "I have the flu. I'm running a fever, so could you please bring me an ice pack?" I made that request, but Mark just shouted, "Don't mess with me!" and stormed out of the room. I can't believe he won't even grant me this small favor. The moment I had that thought, something poured down on my head from above. "What the?" Looking up in surprise, I saw Mark with an empty bucket in his arms, a malicious grin on his face. Looks like he dumped a bucket of ice water on me. That cool you down? He mocked me with those words. Then from behind him, I heard a low, hellish voice. Hey, Mark. Is that all you have to say? My name is Nicole. A 50-year-old working woman. I met my husband, Daniel, who is the same age as me, after we started working. We've had our share of arguments, but I think we get along quite well without any major fights. He now serves as an executive at a large corporation and is often away from home due to business trips and meetings. However, I believe he cares about me in his own way. When he is at home, he proactively helps with household chores like a good husband should. From the outside, our home may seem happy, but we had a particular concern weighing on us. It's about our son, Mark, who is now 24 years old this year. His rebellious phase got worse after he entered high school. I've always been a bit introverted, so I guess he doesn't like that about me either. He stopped throwing things or breaking walls, but the moment he sees me, he glares at me as if he's met a hated enemy and hurls harsh words at me. Daniel would get furious when he saw this, so Mark behaves in front of him. But as soon as it's just the two of us, he becomes aggressive, which troubles me. Mark, who has a large build like Daniel, scares me. Cowering in fear of not knowing when he might do something also seems to displease him. In contrast to me, Mark apparently respects Daniel, who deals with things resolutely. Daniel serves as an executive at his company, so he seems to be Mark's role model. Because of this situation, when Daniel notices Mark being hostile towards me, he scolds him, and he apologizes obediently. But it's only superficial. Deep in his eyes, there was always disdain for me. Mark's rebellious phase didn't end even after he became an adult and got a job. With Daniel being away from home more often, I feel like Mark's defiance towards me is growing year by year. Welcome back. You're late today. I accidentally let those words slip out, and Mark glares at me. Shut up, you useless woman. I'm working here. It's not an easy job that anyone can do like yours. Don't complain about every little thing. That's the kind of retort I get whenever I say anything. I'm sorry. You're right. I timidly gauge his mood. He probably doesn't like seeing me like this either, clicking his tongue and quickly going to his room. I let out a sigh. Where did I go wrong in raising him? What is it about me that he dislikes so much? For the past few years, I've been agonizing over it whenever I see Mark. I'm home, Nicole. Wow, another extravagant meal today. Returning to the living room while taking Daniel's bag as he came back from a business trip. He smiled happily upon seeing the lavish dinner. It's no exaggeration to say that I prepare these meals to see this smile. To reward Daniel, who is always working hard while enduring the pressure of being a corporate executive, I cook a luxurious meal on days when he comes home. I hand him a cold beer and serve the freshly made soup to soothe his tired body. Just seeing his delighted face makes me feel like all my worries have been blown away. However, my moment of happiness quickly comes to an end. You only buy convenient meals on regular days though. Mark mutters. Indeed, my work ran late yesterday, so I bought some deli food from the supermarket for dinner. But it's not like I settle for deli food every day as he implies. But Mark dislikes the fact that I always make these lavish meals whenever Daniel comes home. He thinks of me as a detestable mom who hardly does any housework. Due to work on regular days, but puts on a good face only when he is back. He thoroughly despises me, his mom, who appears depraved to him. Hey, Mark. What's with that tone? I didn't say anything. Daniel scolds Mark, who was glaring at the extravagant meal with a look of hatred, but he turns his face away. Daniel sighs and starts eating. This has been going on for years, and he seems to be giving up too. After the meal, Mark quickly moves to the sofa to watch TV. Daniel casually helps with clearing the dishes, but when was the last time Mark helped out? Even when I once asked him to help take out the trash or put away the dishes, I was met with a terrible response. Huh? Why do I have to do that? Housework is a woman's job, isn't it? Even my boss's wife does everything at home. Don't try to take it easy by yourself. Saying that, he threw the garbage bag at me, and I never asked him for help again. No matter what I say, it's futile. Even when Daniel scolded him before, he obediently listened in the moment. But as soon as he knew Daniel was away on a business trip, he went right back to his old ways. He leaves his clothes lying around after taking them off, demands a meal as soon as he gets home, and doesn't even get up from the table. Because he talks back to me no matter what I say, I've stopped saying anything at all. I know this is making Mark even more defiant, but I no longer have the courage to scold him after receiving too many horrible words. Even Daniel consoles me. You don't have to push yourself. Saying. We had completely given up on Mark. Then one day, I felt a chill. I woke up feeling terrible, nauseous and all. I talked to my boss, left work early, and rushed to the hospital near the office. It turned out to be the flu. I reported it to my boss right away and got a week off. Gradually, my joints started aching. I guess the fever was setting in. As soon as I got home, I collapsed into bed and fell asleep. Hey, wake up! Why are you sleeping without making dinner? I was jolted awake by shouting and my body being shaken. Wait a second, Mark. I have a fever. I said that while holding back the urge to vomit, but Mark just yelled louder. Huh? A fever? I don't care. Go make dinner. As Mark tried to snatch away my blanket, tears welled up in my eyes. Stop it! I have the flu. Let me sleep. I managed to say in a feeble, cough-ridden voice, but Mark showed no sign of believing me. The flu? You bullshit. You're just faking it, aren't you? Hurry up and make dinner. I'm starving here. Shivering with fever, I desperately clutched the blanket. Call it a lie, call it malingering, I was in no condition to get up. Through my shaky vision, I realized the fever was rising, just as I expected. Please! Stop it, Mark! I'm not feeling well. Bring me an ice pack. This is how much my own mother is pleading. Even for Mark, I thought he'd at least do that much. But Mark only got angrier at my request. An ice pack? Why the hell should I have to do that? Kicking the side table, he stomped out of the room noisily. God, what a son. His mother is suffering this much, and he can't even bring an ice pack? The tears spilling out felt hot. The moment I wrapped myself in the blanket, ice water was suddenly dumped on me from above. I leapt up. Before I could process what happened, the cold water seeped through my body. What are you doing? Mark grinned at me, shivering satisfyingly. Did that cool you down? Now hurry up and make dinner. As he grabbed my soaked pajamas, a voice that sounded like it crawled out from the depths of the earth rang out from behind Mark. Hey, Mark. Is that all you have to say? Mark jumped as if struck by the voice and spun around. Anthony? Why are you here? The man shoved aside the startled him and wrapped me in a towel he found nearby. It was Anthony Smith, a friend of Daniel's and also Mark's boss. He used to come over to our house a lot, and I doted on him quite a bit since he looked up to Daniel so much. But ever since Mark was born and Daniel's business trips increased, We'd only kept in touch by text. Mr. Smith, He cut me off as I tried to ask why he was here, and laid out a fresh blanket for me. He may not have changed, but I'm surprised he still remembered where we kept the bedding. Laying me down as I grew hazy with fever, he glared at Mark, who stood there ashen-faced. Does he always treat you like this? Huh? No, well... Mark seemed unable to comprehend what was happening. His boss showing up out of the blue, and on top of that, his boss tending to me with practiced ease, it looked like it thoroughly baffled him. As Mark stood there stunned by the sudden turn of events, Anthony began to explain. You see, I owe Nicole and Daniel a great deal. That he was Daniel's friend, that he'd been in their care for a long time. That they continued to dote on him even after they got married. Anthony's admiration for Daniel was so effusive it was almost embarrassing to hear. It made me proud to know Daniel was looked up to this much. I knew you were Nicole and Daniel's son the moment you joined the company as a new hire. Then why didn't you say anything? As like his calculating character, he's probably thinking he could have gotten closer to the capable Anthony. It makes me despair for my own son. I had no intention of mixing personal matters with work. Seeing through Mark's ulterior motives, Anthony stated bluntly. First of all, you'd find it hard to work too if your dad's friend was your boss, wouldn't you? Unable to argue with that, Mark made an awkward face. Mom, did you know Mr. Smith was coming today? Mark accused, biting his lip in frustration. Seeing him like that, Anthony heaved a big sigh. She didn't know. In the first place, I just found out now that Anthony is Mark's boss. The company name I heard from Anthony long ago is different from where Mark works. Maybe they changed the company name at some point. I wasn't sure about Daniel. But I certainly didn't know, and I didn't even think he would come to visit at this timing. I desperately denied it to Mark, who was glaring at me. I shrugged my shoulders, wondering what he thought of Mark's ugly behavior. The other day, Daniel invited me to hang out with him after a long time. He said he wanted to surprise you too. He had just gone on a trip, so he seemed to have brought a souvenir on purpose. Mark awkwardly averted his gaze from Anthony, who was holding up the souvenir in his hand. Just a little while ago, I got a call from Daniel saying he was running a bit late and to go ahead and enter the house. When I was about to ring the doorbell, I heard a scream. Anthony said that when he put his hand on the door, thinking something had happened. The door was unlocked, and he hurriedly entered the house, fearing it might be a burglar or something. I'm sorry for worrying you. It's embarrassing to be seen like this. Breathing heavily, I finally managed to squeeze out my voice, and Anthony hurriedly knelt down beside me. Nicole, please stay in bed. I'm the one who should apologize. So sudden, oh. You really have a high fever. When he readjusted the blanket, his hand must have touched my face. He hurriedly wiped my wet hair again with a towel. Thank you. Actually, it seems I've caught the flu. Anthony's expression turned to one of anger. He turned to Mark and shouted in an angry voice. You threw ice water on her when she had such a high fever. How dare you? Mark was so overwhelmed that he sat down and put his arms in front of his face to protect himself. Oh, what a pathetic son he is. I watched the scene unfold in the corner of my hazy vision, breathing out hot breaths. What's going on? In the midst of this, it seemed that Daniel had come home. He peeked into the bedroom after hearing the noisy voices. What are you guys doing? Nicole! What the hell happened? He was surprised by the unbelievable sight of me lying in bed with labored breathing. Anthony shouting with an angry expression, and Mark cowering in fear. To the astounded Daniel, Anthony briefly explained the situation. "This idiot, what has he done?" An angry shout even louder than Anthony's resounded, and Mark began to apologize while trembling. "I'm sorry. She said she wanted to cool down, and I was just hungry, so." "It's not just. This isn't something you can apologize for. Do you understand?" He probably didn't really understand why he was being yelled at. Mark started making irrelevant excuses, and Daniel and Anthony's anger exploded. I'm sorry. Anthony grabbed Mark by the neck as he apologized with tears in his eyes and left the bedroom. "I'll beat some sense into him. I'll join you right away." "I'm sorry, but please scold him," Daniel replied, and he replaced the wet towel and pajamas for me. He threw the fallen ice into the trash can and tossed the wet bed sheets into the laundry basket. "I'm sorry. If I had been more careful." Mark was relatively well behaved in front of Daniel, so he probably never thought he would go this far. I had also been considerate and given up on consulting with him or scolding Mark. "It's not just your fault. Sadly, it's our failure as parents." "I'm sorry." As I said that while coughing, Daniel bit his lip and apologized again. The way he bit his lip was so similar to his son, despite being so different in character. I wondered how he had grown up to be such a person. Tormented by deep regret, I had fallen asleep before I knew it. Even after I fell asleep, it seemed that Mark was lectured by Daniel and Anthony until late at night. A few days later, Anthony came to visit again and told me about Mark's behavior at work. It turned out that there were rumors that Mark was also harsh on other female employees within the company. His performance was decent, and he pretended to be a nice guy in front of Anthony and other superiors, just like his attitude towards Daniel. Therefore, perhaps because he was the son of the adored Daniel, they thought the rumors were spread by employees who were jealous of Mark's performance and didn't pay much attention to them. However, after this incident, they changed their minds and immediately conducted a fact-finding investigation, which revealed that Mark had been far more misogynistic than they had thought. Some female employees even cried during the interviews, and his past problematic behaviors finally came to light. "I apologize for the trouble he has caused." "No, I'm his boss and I didn't notice either." Anthony said that to me when I apologized, but it was clear that our parenting had failed. I was so ashamed and miserable that I couldn't possibly lift my head. Mark was to receive a pay cut, and it seems he went crying to Anthony. But he was flatly rejected as he brought it upon himself. Rather, he was told to fix that twisted mentality of his and was sent to an external training program on morals that was rumored to be quite strict. We ended up having the company follow up on our parenting. "I'm sorry to Daniel and Nicole, but I couldn't protect him either." The problematic behavior Mark had been causing due to his misogyny quickly spread throughout the company. And it seems he is being viewed with a very cold eye. It seems that even the other superiors he had been sucking up to have given up on him. And Anthony told me that he is feeling quite miserable. "No, I just hope this will make Mark a better person. I know it's impossible to tell you not to worry, but absolutely do not help Mark even if he comes to you for help." As if seeing through my heart as I sighed with worry, Daniel said that no matter how terribly he treated me, Mark is still my son. I also felt guilty for raising him like that. Seeing me so dejected, Daniel kicked Mark out of the house. He declared that he was disowning him and would never let him enter the house again. If I thought about what was best for him, I realized that sometimes tough love was necessary. And I was scolded a little for that, but I finally started to see that it might be true. On the day Mark was kicked out of the house, I'll never forget the tired look on his face and the resentment-filled eyes he gave me. Noticing this, Daniel's anger became even more apparent. And he demanded that Mark return the money he had lent him to buy a new car right away. "I don't have that kind of money." To Mark's response, Daniel coldly said, "If you can't come up with it, then sell that car and pay me back immediately." With no other choice, it seems Mark had to give up the car. I was later told that the money had been properly transferred. Maybe Mark and I will never truly understand each other. Those were the kind of eyes he had. Until the very last moment he left this house, he looked at me with such bitterness and resentment. After that, it turns out Mark ended up quitting his job. He couldn't handle the rumors spreading throughout the company. Daniel went to check on him and said it seemed Mark was living in an old apartment and working part-time jobs. Mark, who had always lived in his parents' home, was probably paying for utilities for the first time. At first, he apparently tried to keep up appearances as usual, but his savings quickly ran out. One day, perhaps unable to stand that kind of life anymore, he called me when he knew I would be alone. "This is all your fault. What mom you are, a woman you are, putting me through like this." He went on and on with his resentful words. Mark is probably a lost cause now. There's no sign of remorse whatsoever. If he had apologized even once, if he had pleaded for help just once, I probably would have lent him a hand without telling Daniel. But now, I just don't care anymore. No matter how much it pained me to give birth to my own child, how can he think I'd be okay with being hated this much? Does he think that just because I'm his mother, just because I'm a woman, he can say whatever he wants? "You're pathetic. Get over yourself already." I said that and hung up the phone. The annoying ringtone started ringing again right away, but I unplugged the cord. I've already blocked his number on my cell phone. This home phone was the last connection I had with Mark. And Mark severed that connection himself. After discussing it with Daniel, we decided to move to a new house. Luckily, in this day and age, a couple in their 50s in their prime working years can rent a house of this size anywhere. Even if Mark came to that house starving, it's probably an empty lot by now. Unless Daniel or I contact him, I may never see him again. But that's okay. After a long time, it'll be just Daniel and me, and I look forward to enjoying our retirement in a small room. A faint knock echoed from the front door. I wouldn't have heard it if I'd been in the living room. It was only because I happened to be in the hallway that I caught the sound. Another knock. Through the thick, frosted glass, I could make out a small figure. What was happening? Who was on the other side of the door? Before my mind could process it, my body was already moving. I gently opened the door to find my granddaughter, Amanda, her lips ghostly pale. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I asked, and she nodded slightly between chattering teeth. As I tried to embrace her for warmth, her body felt so cold it seemed to chill me to the core. No wonder, the weather forecast had said today would be the coldest day of the winter so far. I had a million questions. But first I needed to help Amanda, who was barely breathing. "Robert! Boil some water, quick!" I shouted, and Amanda spoke in a small voice. "Mom is Granny, I need to tell you. Let's get you warmed up first, Amanda. You can tell me once you've settled down." If Amanda knew the way to the apartment, then our daughter Melissa must still be there. We had to go and help her as soon as possible. "Amanda, do you know the place? Robert is getting the car ready, so..." Amanda stared out at the yard, her eyes brimming with tears that spilled down her cheeks in large droplets. "Never mind. Mom is gone now too." She stood up unsteadily, staggering towards the front door. What did she mean, gone? "Wait, Amanda! What happened? I had no idea what was going on. What had she sensed? The flower all fell and gone. That means Mom is gone too. Her face was etched with despair. A single camellia blossom from the yard had dropped onto the snow. It was the same moment that Buddy, our golden retriever, had taken his last breath. It wasn't illness, but a peaceful, natural death. My granddaughter Amanda wept uncontrollably. For us too, Buddy had been a cherished part of the family for 10 years, so the grief cut deep. Buddy was smart and had been very close with Amanda. They were like true siblings. So I couldn't tell her to stop crying now. You can't say something like that to a 4-year-old in the first place. Amanda apparently cried nonstop for the next 3 days. A year passed since Buddy's death, and Amanda turned 5. Robert, now retired, was at a loose end and threw himself into cooking. Perhaps thanks to his efforts, I too have more free time and can spend relaxing days. Our daughter Melissa still often brings Amanda to visit us at the family home. I'm struck by how much Amanda has grown. When the two of them visit, Robert enthusiastically whips up meals. He absolutely adores seeing Amanda's delighted face, he says. He's completely smitten with his granddaughter. However, there was one thing that worried Robert and me. Kevin, how's he doing these days? Yeah, he's fine. Anyway. Once again, she brushed off the question with a transparent excuse. The reason Robert deliberately asked about Kevin was that Melissa's husband never accompanied them on visits. And Melissa would react with fierce rejection whenever the topic came up. Living in our own peaceful bubble, I couldn't help but worry about our daughter's home life. Could they be experiencing some kind of harassment? Strangely, once that thought took hold, the flood of negative speculations and premonitions became unstoppable. There are no visible wounds or bruises, but could it be violence? The doubts accumulated gradually, like the snow that fell last winter. Then one evening, while cleaning up the kitchen he had used, Robert casually brought up an idea. Hey, next time Melissa and Amanda visit, how about I take Amanda out to play, and Stephanie, you can try talking to Melissa while we're gone. Robert was the first to suggest investigating. Amanda, who adores her grandpa, would gladly go out with him without any suspicion. With both father and daughter absent, leaving two mothers in similar positions alone together, Melissa might feel more inclined to open up. If she still stubbornly refused to talk even after going to such lengths, then there must be some unsavory circumstances she's hiding. It was an ingenious plan. Got it. I'll leave Amanda to you then. A few days later. Amanda, want to go out just the two of us? I want to go. Mom, can I? Is that okay, Dad? Yeah, you two take it easy for a change. All right. Well then, I'll leave her in your care. Amanda, be on your best behavior, okay? I will. Stage 1 of the operation passed without a hitch. Granted, Melissa showed a hint of suspicion at the sudden proposal, but seemed unable to find a reason to refuse. Melissa, is there something you want to talk about? I poured 2 cups of instant coffee and set them on the table. Cutting straight to the chase, I asked bluntly. So that's why you took Amanda out? Well, I appreciate it anyway. Melissa appeared somewhat resigned. Or perhaps exhausted. After a brief pause, Melissa's complexion changed drastically as if she had aged a decade in an instant. I couldn't help but exclaim. What happened? I really didn't want to talk about it, but... Melissa had married a man named Kevin 8 years ago. They were introduced by a mutual friend. When he came to the family meeting, he made a good impression, and the two seemed to get along very well, which put my mind at ease. Until they had a child, both worked to support their small household. They were so busy that they rarely showed their faces at our home. That began to change after their daughter Amanda was born. Melissa quit her job to become a housewife and focus on childcare, but apparently, that was the catalyst for his attitude to deteriorate day by day. It started with complaints about her leaving her job, but now it has escalated into increasingly harsh and scathing verbal abuse. From what I heard, it's not hard to imagine he seems on the verge of becoming physically violent, changing for the worse after marriage. It's a story I've heard of happening occasionally. But it seems that wasn't the case for our daughter and son-in-law. It undoubtedly began after Amanda was born. However, he has never harmed Amanda in any way and appears to be a normal father in that regard. He won't even tell me what he's so dissatisfied with, so I have no idea. Being in that house makes me think about those things. That's why I've been coming here more often. I felt my heart crushed with misery. Why couldn't I see it? Why did Melissa have to endure such pain? The surging emotions choked my throat. No matter how much I thought about what to say, I remained trapped. Only when I took Melissa's hand could I finally speak. Thank you for telling me. It's going to be okay. We're here for you. When you go back today, pack your things right away and come to our house, both of you. You don't have to force yourself to stay with him. But I can't prepare the money right away. We have some savings, so that can come later. The priority now is to get you away from him. As I said that, Melissa shed a single large tear. Welcome back, Amanda. Robert, did you get lost? We were fine. I wondered if Amanda was aware of the situation. Now, and even before, it didn't seem that way, but this child has a brave and resilient personality. So perhaps she's putting on an act to avoid worrying us. Maybe she's just pretending to be okay. What a terrible story. But that's all the more reason we have to act now. I couldn't allow my precious daughter and granddaughter to be exposed to such fierce storms any longer. After sending Melissa and Amanda home, I explained the situation to Robert, and he nodded, saying, "That's the best thing to do." He was so furious that he looked ready to rush over and beat Kevin up right then and there, but I managed to calm him down. I don't know what he's thinking, pulling this nonsense. However, the two of them never showed up, no matter how long we waited. As 2 hours, then 3 hours passed, my anxiety grew ever stronger. Melissa and her husband live in the same state as us, and while it's a bit far, it's not an impossible distance to walk. It certainly doesn't take 2 hours of walking. Could they be out shopping before coming to stay with us? Even so, there's no word from them. Finally reaching my limit, I tried calling, but no matter how many times it rang, the call never connected. Wait here, I'll go check on them first. If it was going to turn out like this, I should have driven them. 15 minutes after driving off, Robert, who had said those words, called me. Stephanie, contact the police. There's no one in this house. Did he realize something, or had he been planning this all along? To this day, I don't know, but Kevin disappeared somewhere, taking his wife Melissa and daughter Amanda with him. Robert, I've told you many times. The police can't investigate for something like moving without notice. We'll do what we can, so please go home for now. I thought the police refusing to act in situations like this was something that only happened in fiction. I never imagined we'd actually be dismissed. Come on, detective, I'm begging you. This is clearly a missing persons case. My daughter and granddaughter have been kidnapped. What else could it be but a crime? With the evidence being just one complaint, there's nothing we can do. I'm not saying we won't do anything. We'll do what we can. I could vaguely sense that saying anything more would be futile. And I couldn't say they were completely neglecting us. Robert, let's go home. There are other ways. If the state won't act, then we'll get individuals to act. It's not that I don't feel any frustration, but I could somewhat understand what they were saying. Indeed, it doesn't seem like the police will act with just that. I'll pay. You'll find them, won't you? Yes, it's our duty. We'll gladly lend you our assistance. Now, can you tell us the details? While I didn't want to believe the police wouldn't act at all, I also didn't think they'd fully commit, so as a last resort, we turned to private investigators. Fortunately, they were very positive and asked for various pieces of information. I explained in detail the little I had heard from Melissa that day. That said, there was only so much I could tell them. After all, as the police had said, I too had only heard a single complaint. Then, a month passed without any developments. Winter had truly set in, and some days even brought snow. Were Melissa and Amanda safe? The winter we spent unable to even know that much was colder than any winter before. On a day when snow quietly fell from gloomy clouds. No matter what I did, I couldn't focus, but doing nothing was just as unsettling. As I restlessly cleaned the house, I felt as if something was calling to me and paused for a moment. Knock knock. I surely wouldn't have heard it if I'd been in the living room. It was only because I happened to be cleaning the hallway that I caught the faint knocking at the front door. Knock. Through the thick frosted glass, I could see a small figure. What was happening? Who was on the other side of the door? Before my mind could understand, my body was moving. Gently opening the door so as not to knock over the small shadow, there stood Amanda, her lips ghostly pale. What's wrong? Are you okay? Amid the chattering of her trembling teeth, Amanda gave a small nod. Cold. I need heat. When I embraced her to warm her up, Amanda's body was so cold it felt like it would chill me to the core. No wonder, the weather forecast said today would be the coldest day of the winter so far. Robert! Bring some towels and blankets! I had a million questions. But before that, I had to save Amanda, who was barely breathing. And boil some water too! Got it! Mom is. Granny, Amanda, I'll tell you. First things first, Amanda. Tell me once you've properly warmed up. I brought Amanda right in front of the stove and wrapped her in a blanket. Looking outside from the living room, I could see snow starting to accumulate in the yard. Feeling a bit warmer? Yeah. But Mom is. Can you talk? Will you tell me? Amanda began speaking in fragments. According to her, when they got home that day a month ago, Kevin was already there. He then forcibly took them to a room in a different apartment, not their own home, and kept the two of them confined there. It was somewhere in the state. And Amanda had memorized the route from there to our house during walks with Buddy, which is how she managed to make it here. What a clever, brave child. No, this isn't the time to be impressed. If Amanda knows the way to the apartment in question, she must still be there. We have to hurry and rescue her. Amanda, do you know the place? Robert is getting the car ready now, so. Amanda stared out at the yard. Large tears overflowed from her eyes. Never mind. Mom is gone now too. Amanda stood up unsteadily, staggering towards the front door with faltering steps. What did she mean by gone? Wait, Amanda! What's wrong? Lashing myself for being dumbfounded, I sprang up and forcefully caught Amanda in an embrace. But I had no idea what was going on. What on earth had she sensed? All the flour is gone, so Mom is gone too. Amanda's face was etched with despair. I somehow got the sobbing Amanda into the car and reluctantly asked her for directions. Right now, she is the only person who knows Melissa's whereabouts. Feeling impatient, I slowly drove the car for over 30 minutes to get directions from her. She had walked this distance all alone, so the terror she must have felt is immeasurable. Here. Amanda pointed with swollen eyes. What lay ahead was a terribly run-down apartment complex. Wait here, I'll go check. Robert leapt out of the car, a deck brush in one hand as a precautionary means of self-defense. Left in the car, all I could do was hold Amanda and try to calm her. Less than 5 minutes later, there was a rough bang. Wondering what happened, I looked at a room in the old apartment and saw that Robert had apparently slammed the front door, and in his arms was Melissa's limp form. I hurriedly opened the rear door. Mom! Melissa! It's okay, Amanda. She still has a pulse. But she's unconscious. I've already called the ambulance, so for now we have to warm her up. The car's heater was cranked up excessively. While not as much as Amanda had been a short while ago, Melissa was also thoroughly chilled. She seemed to be gradually recovering, but it was still worrying. 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived, and I felt the tiniest bit of relief. While Robert explained the situation to one of the paramedics, the others carried Melissa into the ambulance. That's when it hit me. Amanda had been in the same place this whole time too. Please examine this child too. She was in the same place until just now. I can't drive, so I got into the ambulance to accompany the two of them. Robert followed behind the ambulance in the car. The next day, with the situation taking a major turn and actual harm done, the police finally got off their asses. At this point, Kevin became a suspect in a kidnapping and confinement case, officially pursued by the police. At first I felt anger at their inflexibility, which eventually turned to exasperation, but seeing them act at this stage made my anger surge again. In any case, once they get moving, it's only a matter of time before the truth comes to light. Melissa is still unconscious, but her condition itself seems stable. Amanda was also hospitalized for malnutrition and is currently on the road to recovery. But the psychological damage inflicted on her young mind is immeasurable. I tried contacting Kevin again, but it was completely impossible to reach him. It's only natural. According to Robert, the room was empty except for several boxes, a small table, an old heater, a dirty blanket, and a few other items. It was utterly lacking in the necessities for human habitation. And yet, my daughter and granddaughter had spent a whole month there. What was he thinking, suddenly disappearing with his wife and child, only for him to be absent from the scene? The police said there were only traces of 2 people living in that old apartment room. And even that was below the bare minimum, especially regarding meals. They likely didn't have enough to eat properly. In other words, Kevin had disappeared with the intention of confining the 2 of them in the old apartment for some reason from the start, while he himself observed from somewhere without getting involved. Regardless of his true intentions, he was the lowest of the low. 2 days after finding Melissa, she somehow regained consciousness. She still seems to have difficulty moving on her own, but she's recovered enough to sit and talk. Finally, we may see some light shed on the full picture of this incident. Can you tell me what happened that day? At first, she remained silent, but after a short pause, she began speaking hesitantly. When I got home, he was waiting. He took my smartphone and wallet. Then I was put in the car and taken to that apartment. After cutting off her means of external communication, he pressured her to work. The intensity of his actions at that time was so overwhelming that it made her chest tighten just recalling it. However, the only work that could be done in such a place was a side job at best, and even the meager income she earned was mostly taken from her. Why didn't you escape? If you had wanted to, you could have left that place any time. In fact, Amanda had somehow managed to escape to our house when she saw an opening, though we still don't know the details. It was a place with absolutely no security. Of course, it's not that I didn't think about it. But he made it clear, like driving a nail. It's pointless to run, and if you do, I won't show mercy. So, when I thought about something happening to Amanda, I couldn't move. There seemed to be no direct violence, but the fact that he had taken away their freedom and even threatened them made it decisively a crime. How could he? Do you have any idea why? To be honest, it pained me. This was like asking if Melissa had even the slightest reason for what happened. But I didn't know what else to ask. Yes, there were so many things I didn't understand about the whole situation. His attitude changed around the time I quit my job to focus on childcare, so considering that, I can only think he really wanted me to work. It's okay. You did nothing wrong. It seems difficult to determine the cause. Then we have no choice but to investigate his true intentions by other means. So, do you know where he is? The police are apparently looking for him too, but they don't seem to have any leads so far. It's embarrassing to say, but we don't have much in savings, so I don't think he's at a hotel or anything like that. If he's not at home, he might be crashing at a friend's place. My instincts told me this would be important testimony. Got it. I'll tell the police and private investigator later. And the day before yesterday, Amanda said you had passed away. I'm glad it wasn't a serious illness, but why would Amanda say that? I probably let a cold get out of hand. I haven't been able to stop coughing for a week. We're not eating properly, so things that should heal don't, you know? Melissa smiled wryly in exasperation. Amanda, how are you feeling? Can you talk to Granny for a bit? Okay. How did you get out of that room? Dad wasn't there. If he's not there, you can get out. As expected, she is brave. I felt sorry for her, but more than that, I was proud. And there was one more thing I wanted to ask. It wasn't directly related to the incident, but it was something I was personally very curious about. Why did you say Mom was gone the day before yesterday? Because the red flower fell. That's how Buddy went away. It seemed this child believed that when a camellia blossom falls, someone dies. Indeed, the way the entire flower falls from the base is distinctive, so even as a child, it's not hard to understand why she would think that, looking back now. Buddy passed away around the end of winter. It was the season when camellias fall. I see. So that's what it was. That's not that kind of flower. It's okay. Mom is alive, right? Yeah. With a small nod, Amanda shed tears again. Without asking why, I embraced her. This time, there was no feeling of freezing. Grandpa, Granny, thank you. For saving Mom. Not at all. Everything was thanks to her bravery. No, it's thanks to you, Amanda. I should be thanking you. 3 days after Melissa and Amanda were taken into protective custody, we received news that Kevin had been arrested. I placed a hand on my chest in relief and stroked it. As Melissa had said, he had been hiding out at a friend's house. But while it would be one thing if it were just a friend, apparently that friend was a woman, and the fact that they had an inappropriate relationship also came to light at the same time. More importantly, Amanda's health had completely recovered, and she returned to being the cheerful Amanda she used to be. Melissa also recovered steadily without any serious issues. When I told her about Kevin's arrest, the light seemed to return to Melissa's face. Now, there's no need to face that fear anymore. The court issued a restraining order, but that alone isn't enough to feel safe. So my husband and I, along with Melissa and Amanda, moved to the suburbs away from the city center. It's been almost 6 months now. And as another big change, we decided to take in a new red-haired golden retriever. Amanda named him Teddy. It seems she couldn't forget about Buddy after all. Amidst the lush greenery, the sister and brother, one human and one dog, run around energetically in the yard that has doubled in size. Fortunately, Teddy's personality is just like Buddy's, who could be called his predecessor, and he's very attached to Amanda. It's such a heartwarming sight that I almost let out a sigh without thinking. I'm home. I'm home. As dusk approached, Robert and Melissa returned from the courthouse. With the siblings playing in the yard out of the corner of my eye, I was finally able to hear the details from the two of them. The crimes Kevin was charged with were mainly false imprisonment, coercion, and abandonment of a person in one's care, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. To be honest, considering all the things he did, I felt that wasn't enough. I even wish he would never come out. The reason he forced Melissa to work was simply because he wanted to take it easy himself. For such a trivial reason, he plunged his wife and child into terror, utterly lacking any sense of morality or ethics. And my anger was also directed at ourselves for not seeing through him. Regarding the woman who had been sheltering Kevin, the point of contention seems to be whether she was aware of the secrecy, but at least for me, it didn't matter. In any case, we've now moved to a peaceful place surrounded by nature, and the 4 of us plus 1 dog are starting a new life. The wounds we've suffered won't heal so easily. But Amanda plays with Teddy both inside and outside the house, and Melissa is starting to return to her original cheerful personality. Not everything is going smoothly, but I really like this life. When we moved, we brought the camellia tree we had planted in the yard to our current home. It took a lot of effort, but this tree is a commemorative tree for our daughter, so we couldn't make the decision to leave it behind. Now it's the height of summer and there's no sign of it, but when winter comes again, it will surely bloom with beautiful, magnificent flowers. And even if the seasons change and those flowers eventually fall, I'm sure she won't cry anymore.